So let's move on to changing landscape. We're going to spend just a little bit of time with how things have changed before moving on to the stuff that you all really want to talk about. So let's dive into that. So to get started, how has marketing changed? That I think all of us most of us sitting in the homes, you can tell from the backgrounds and in Zoom here. How has marketing changed in the last few years, if anything? And what are you doing to adapt to the new world? Let's start with Eileen.
That's a great question. I mean, we could take that in lots of different ways. What comes up for me in response to that prompt is, what we see is a lot of companies who maybe started out as like a enterprise sales-led motion, deciding that they're going to try to be more hybrid and have, part of their go-to-market be self-serve. And when that happens, marketing suddenly gets a much bigger seat at the table, because not only from, the SEO folks having all the keyword trends, or the paid digital folks having the same, they also are, by probably controlling the website, having the front end into that self-serve funnel. And so that creates a lot more alignment with the product, revenue accountable folks, and also marketing. So that would be one way that I'd start to think about the answer to that question.
Nate, have you seen any big changes either at your day job or in look back?
In marketing in general?
Yeah, in terms of the last few years, the importance of marketing and how you do it even. Yeah,
I think more and more the data-driven marketers are best equipped for this world where it's getting harder and harder to, like, first-party data is becoming way more important. Facebook's recent iOS changes, it's just like you have less information to work with. So the information that you do have, you have to make the most of. The foundational stuff has to be dialed. I think historically, like a quote unquote data-driven marketer was someone who would talk about like A/B testing an email subject line. Whereas today, I think it's someone who's like, yeah, I can export all the raw data. I can merge it with all my in-platform data. I can cut it up and analyze it and figure out what's working, what's not. To Eileen's point, I can translate that to the website and what we should be testing there. And so, yeah, I really think it's starting from a comfort with working with data, a desire to kind of uncover the truth at all costs, and on top of that, kind of like translate that to marketing, and have, while you're probably not going to be designing stuff, you can have an opinion on it, and you can understand what works and what doesn't, and feed that to your designers and everyone who's kind of making stuff look good and testing it, and just kind of informing how they're doing that. Because usually that team is much more interested in like, hey, tell me what works and I'll spin something up that I think will get the job done. They're not going to be in the weeds, kind of understanding what's working, what's not. I think that's the marketer's job.
Anything to add there, Carrie?
Nope, I think they hit the nail on the head with that.
I think one of the things we're seeing on our side is just an increased investment in marketing, because your sales team isn't out there doing outside sales, or at least not until very recently, right? So a lot of people are investing in things like digital product and website and these sorts of things to try to attract people in a world where everyone's doing that. And so the data, I think, to your point, Nate, is about getting the right people, the message in front of the right people instead of more people, because we're very good at getting the message to everyone, but getting it to the specific person that has buying intent right now, that's where the analysis comes in, because everyone is so inundated with this stuff that, if it isn't perfectly targeted, it slides off these days. All right. So it's at simultaneously the most important thing now, and also one of the hardest things we can do. Right. So wanted to jump to hard. So you're talking about data analysis, Nate, and getting all this data on your clients, merging it with your front end funnel stuff. How has the new changes in privacy law impacted that? Because at the same time, you've got these big global forces, either the European Union or even these big companies, Apple and Microsoft, really clamping down on the amount of data we can collect on people.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's done a few things. I think the businesses that everyone's been impacted by it, but there have been businesses that, there's a lot of talk, like Facebook, for example, the iOS 14 stuff. There's companies that have just given up on it and they're like, it doesn't work anymore and we're not even going to do it. There were companies that were kind of built on the, like it worked and then all of a sudden it didn't and they have no idea what's going on. It's very hard to make sense of it. So I think to that point, it's always been important to do this, but I think more and more it's been important to have like the foundational stuff running. So a system around like, what are our KPIs? What are we looking at every week? How are we blending down our acquisition costs? Making sure the data is all dialed so that you're more comfortable in this kind of increased ambiguity and you can make sense of it. Making the most of your non-paid stuff so you don't have to rely so heavily on these paid channels where there's a lack of information. So are we collecting leads at a high rate? Are we doing everything we can to convert those leads into buyers and not having to go pay to advertise them on Facebook? Email, SMS, conversion rate optimization stuff, all that stuff, kind of table stakes and more so now. I think it's changed kind of some of the tactical stuff like Facebook, for example, and really any paid social used to get really targeted and that might work really well and you would define your audience. Whereas now it's kind of shifted to, at least what I'm seeing work better, even at really low levels of spend, is going broad with your audience and tailoring your creative, like being very intentional with the creative we're putting out to that audience and kind of using creative to target. So like, okay, I'm going to create creative that's targeted towards new moms, and then I'm going to create another set of creative that's targeted towards messaging convenience for this product or whatever it may be. Letting the algorithm do its thing and trying to uncover who does this creative resonate with and what target audience does it hit, and then scaling the ones that work, turning off the ones that don't. So you can't really get as like targeted upfront. You kind of have to be a little clever in how you do that. And then I guess the last part is like collect as much first party data as possible. So it's kind of opened up some new marketing tech stack type stuff. So there's a lot of like on-page quiz funnel stuff of like, before I get to the purchase, you're asking me a bunch of questions about why I'm interested in this. You're kind of educating me along the process. I'm storing that data on my end, and now I can way better message you going forward, because I just don't have access to any of that stuff anymore on the paid channels.
So that's on paid channels and apps, and on the app side, it's a lot harder as well, because we used to be able to connect to Facebook and get all the data about our users that we wanted, and now we have to justify, everything. And it's the same in Apple and starting the Android ecosphere as well. And so even when you're inside the app, you've got the person to download. Your ability to gather metrics on the person is much more limited than it used to be. So that makes sense. Eileen, you've got a big website that you run. How has this impacted you?
Oh yeah. I mean, we're bracing for it, as a publicly traded company, our lawyers are really nice and conservative and protective of the company because, there have been some massive lawsuits in this space. So as we get compliant with GDPR and CCPA, we're, forecasting things like loss of 70% of data in all the European countries, and the other countries we're configuring that way. I mean, I'm not a lawyer, but I don't know that every, like a earlier stage company needs to be as aggressive as we are being, but totally echo what Nate said about, it's incumbent upon businesses now to start embracing this idea of collecting as much first party data as possible with like good opt-in experiences where people are opting into that. I mean, the other thing just that's like an interesting thing to keep track of is these alternative kind of server side tracking solutions that are on the horizon. I think that the industry will start to kind of standardize around that stuff later. But with, like you said, Chrome and iOS kind of getting rid of the browser-based cookies, like, now and in the next couple of years, I think we'll see more adoption of those things, those server-side technologies.
Yeah,
where the the data is like passed through and then retrieved in the browser.
Right, and if they are using your app, if you can figure out a way to do attribution and connect them to your front end, right? Or you have tools like you have usage data, which is incredibly valuable and can be very deep if you think about it from the perspective of one of the things we want to get out of this feature is understanding more about our users, right? Or can I create a new tool that's going to gather more information about my users that they're going to want to use that's helpful to them, right? And that's how we've kind of stepped around it is, maybe we can't get as much info out of Facebook, but if you're in our app, we can certainly watch what you're doing and gather anonymous data about, general cohorting data and so on. So there's ways around it. But I think we're going to see more narrowing of what people are willing to give us rather than less, especially as attention spans get flightier and flightier. So I think, to your point, more technology here. We're going to probably see AI come into this and some other things there to kind of help us fill in the picture when we can no longer just get the data, right? We have to figure out creative ways.